Have you ever felt that strange vibration crawling through your body just from walking past a house? Tonight, we're not talking about legends, we're talking about real places, haunted houses that can make even the most skeptical afraid to breathe. Houses where doors slam on their own, where the air suddenly turns heavy, and where, in the dead of night, you realize someone is breathing right behind you. Entire families have been destroyed inside these walls, never understanding why. If you're easily scared, you might want to turn this off now, because tonight, it's darker and far more disturbing than usual. Are you ready? Then hit that like button, and let's begin. The Sally House, Atchison, Kansas. From the outside, it doesn't look like much. Just a small two-story home sitting quietly at 508 North 2nd Street in Atchison, Kansas. White siding, a modest porch, curtains in the windows. The kind of place you'd expect to find cookies cooling on the kitchen counter, not claw marks on the walls. But for decades, the Sally House has been known as one of the most violently haunted homes in America. And what's worse, it doesn't just let you leave, it leaves with you. The story begins in the early 1900s. A local doctor lived in the house with his family. One day, a frantic mother brought her 6-year-old daughter, Sally, to him, the girl suffering from intense abdominal pain. The doctor diagnosed appendicitis and, fearing the appendix might burst, began surgery immediately. But according to legend, he did it before the anesthesia had fully taken effect. Sally's screams filled the small examination room. Her tiny hands scratched at the sheets. Her eyes locked on the doctor with pure betrayal. And then, silence. She died on the table. For years afterward, nothing outwardly strange was recorded. Families came and went. But in the early 1990s, a young couple moved in, and that's when the haunting went public. It started small, lights flickering, phones losing signal, cold spots in the hallway. But then Tony, the husband, began waking up with scratches on his chest, abdomen, and back. Sometimes 3 marks, sometimes more, deep enough to draw blood. Paranormal investigators were called in, including teams from Sightings, the 90s television series. They documented sudden battery drains on cameras, EVP recordings of a child's voice, and a shadowy figure that seemed to dart from room to room, always just out of reach. Visitors often describe the same sequence. First, you feel the temperature drop. Not just cool, but unnaturally cold, even in summer. Then you hear the faint sound of a girl giggling from the 2nd floor. If you go up the stairs halfway there, it stops, replaced by the sound of footsteps running away from you. But the most disturbing reports don't end at the front door. Multiple guests have claimed that after leaving the house, the activity followed them home. Electronics malfunctioning, objects moving, even dreams of a little girl standing silently beside their bed. In one infamous case, a paranormal investigator stayed overnight. Hours of nothing. Then, around 3:15 a.m., she felt her right arm burning. She pulled back her sleeve to find fresh red scratches appearing in real time, as if invisible nails were digging into her skin. She left the house before sunrise and never returned. The city of Atchison eventually leaned into the notoriety. They opened the Sally House for tours, even overnight stays for the brave or foolish. Guests still report batteries draining within minutes, objects being thrown, and feelings of overwhelming dread when standing in the upstairs nursery. And yet, no one can agree on what Sally really is. Some believe she's a lonely child spirit. Others say she's not a child at all, but something far older, pretending to be one, using innocence as bait. So if you ever find yourself in Atchison, you might be tempted to visit. But remember, the Sally House doesn't just haunt you while you're inside. It waits to see if you'll take a piece of it with you. Some houses scratch, others watch, and in a quiet town in Iowa, one house has been staring for over a century through the same open doorway where 8 people never walked out. The Villisca Axe Murder House, Villisca, Iowa. Some houses are haunted because of what people think happened inside. This one house is haunted because of what everyone knows happened inside. On a quiet street in the small town of Villisca, Iowa, sits a white 2-story house with lace curtains in the windows and a neat, mowed lawn. If you didn't know its history, you'd think it was the picture of small-town comfort. But if you step inside, the air feels heavy, like it remembers. It was June 10th, 1912. The Moore family, Josiah, his wife Sarah, and their 4 children, had spent the evening at church. 2 young neighbors, Lena and Ina Stillinger, came home with them for a sleepover. 8 people total. By sunrise, all 8 would be dead. The killer slipped in sometime after midnight. Armed with Josiah's own axe, they moved room to room in total silence. Josiah was struck first. The blow so violent, the blade gouged the ceiling above the bed. Sarah was next, then the children. Every victim's face was covered afterward with a sheet or clothing, as if the killer couldn't bear to look, or didn't want someone else to. The Stillinger girls, sleeping in the guest room downstairs, were the last. Lena, investigators believed, may have woken up, her body found in a strange position, as though she'd tried to fight. But in the end, no one survived. The house remained vacant for years. When new owners moved in, they stayed only briefly before moving out, leaving most of their belongings behind. Neighbors began to whisper. They'd seen lights flicker in the empty rooms, heard the sound of children's laughter in the yard long after it had gone dark. And sometimes, they swore, they saw a shadow pass behind the upstairs windows when no one was inside. In the 1990s, the home was restored to its 1912 condition. No electricity, no plumbing, exactly as it was on the night of the murders. That's when paranormal investigators began to document what locals had been saying for decades. Recorders captured disembodied voices, soft, childlike whispers answering direct questions. Video cameras picked up orbs darting through hallways. Some visitors reported feeling a hand grip theirs in the dark. Others left with deep scratches across their backs, discovered only after returning to their hotels. One overnight guest, a seasoned investigator, described being woken by the sound of footsteps coming up the narrow staircase. The steps stopped just outside the bedroom door. She waited, her breath shallow. Then, the sound of the door handle turning. When she yanked it open, there was nothing, but the footsteps began again, heading back down the stairs. Perhaps the most infamous incident happened in November 2014. A paranormal investigator, alone in the house after midnight, was found with a self-inflicted stab wound to the chest. He survived, but claimed he had no memory of harming himself. Police reports noted there was no motive, no sign of struggle, just a sudden, violent act and silence. Today, the Villisca Axe Murder House operates as a museum and overnight experience for those willing to test their courage. Some leave convinced it's just a grim piece of history. Others leave convinced they brought something out with them. Some murders stain the walls. Others sink into the foundation. And in a crumbling Louisiana plantation house, the past hasn't faded. It's still pacing the halls, waiting for the next person to turn the wrong corner. The Myrtles Plantation, St. Francisville, Louisiana. Some houses creak because they're old, this one because something is still moving inside. On the edge of St. Francisville, Louisiana, surrounded by centuries-old oak trees draped in Spanish moss, sits the Myrtles Plantation. Its white columns and wraparound porch look like something from a postcard, until you step inside. Then you notice the air is just a little too still, and the shadows don't always match the light. Built in 1796 by General David Bradford, the plantation has seen more than 2 centuries of life and death. It's been home to wealthy families, soldiers, and countless enslaved people whose names never made it into the records. But what truly sets Myrtles apart is its reputation. Locals call it one of the most haunted houses in America. And the stories are as layered as the peeling paint on its walls. The most famous legend is that of Chloe, a young enslaved woman who worked in the house. Depending on who tells it, Chloe was either caught eavesdropping on the family or suspected of betrayal. As punishment, her ear was cut off, and she began wearing a green turban to hide the injury. Seeking revenge, Chloe supposedly baked a cake for the family, laced with crushed oleander leaves, a deadly poison. The plan backfired. Instead of killing just the master of the house, the cake sickened his wife and 2 daughters, all of whom died. When the other enslaved workers discovered what she'd done, Chloe was hanged, and her body thrown into the Mississippi River. Historians debate whether Chloe ever existed, but guests and staff swear they've seen her. A woman in a green turban, standing silently in a corner, or reflected in mirrors when no one else is there. One famous 1992 photograph, taken by the plantation's owners for insurance records, appears to show a figure in a green headdress peeking between 2 buildings. Experts who examined the photo couldn't explain it. But Chloe isn't the only ghost said to roam the Myrtles. There's the mirror in the main hallway, an ornate piece of glass that visitors say holds more than reflections. On certain days, faint handprints appear on its surface, too small to belong to any living guest. Sometimes the outline of a face presses faintly against the glass, as if someone inside is trying to get out. Guests sleeping in the plantation's bedrooms often wake to the sensation of being tucked in, only to open their eyes and see no one. Others report hearing footsteps pacing the length of the veranda, steady, deliberate, back and forth for hours. Once, a visitor claimed she woke to find a man in period clothing standing at the foot of her bed, head tilted, just watching her. When she screamed, he vanished, but the indentation on the mattress where he'd been sitting remained. Even staff members have had their moments. One guide reported locking up for the night, only to hear a door slam upstairs. When she went to investigate, every door on the second floor was standing wide open. Another said she watched a chandelier in the dining room begin to sway, in a room with no breeze. Skeptics say it's all the power of suggestion. Old houses make noises, mirrors reflect shadows, and the human brain loves a good ghost story. But even the doubters admit, there's something about the Myrtles that's different. It's not the cold spots, it's not the footsteps. It's that feeling in your stomach when you realize the house isn't empty, and you're not the one being watched. Some spirits keep their distance, others stand close enough to breathe the same air. And in a small New England house, one spirit isn't content to haunt the rooms. It's been known to follow visitors home. The Conjuring House, Harrisville, Rhode Island. Some houses whisper, this one never learned how to stop. At the end of a quiet tree-lined road in Harrisville, Rhode Island, stands a weathered 18th century farmhouse. From a distance, it looks like any other New England home. Wood siding faded by time, a sloped roof, and a wraparound porch that creaks with every gust of wind. But up close, you notice something strange. The stillness isn't peaceful, it's expectant. Built in 1736, the house has seen nearly 300 years of history, much of it never written down. The land was once part of the old Arnold estate, where generations lived and died long before the United States even existed. And according to local law, not all of them moved on. The most infamous spirit said to dwell here is Bathsheba Sherman, a woman accused in the mid-1800s of practicing witchcraft and sacrificing an infant to the devil. Though she was never convicted, the rumors clung to her name. And when she died, it's said she cursed the land. Some versions of the story claim she hung herself from a tree behind the house. Others say she simply refused to leave, even in death. For most of its history, the farmhouse was just a quiet rural home. That changed in January 1971, when the Perron family, Roger, Carolyn, and their 5 daughters, moved in. It didn't take long for them to realize something was wrong. It started small, doors opening on their own, piles of dirt appearing on the kitchen floor overnight, the smell of rotting flesh in rooms that had been empty for days. Then came the apparitions. Some were harmless. The friendly spirit of a man in colonial clothing, the smell of fresh flowers with no source. Others weren't. One daughter woke to find her bed levitating. Another felt an icy hand brush her hair aside. Carolyn herself claimed she was pinned to the floor by an unseen force, and when she looked up, she saw a woman's face twisted in rage, inches from her own. The family endured nearly a decade of activity before contacting famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Lorraine, a clairvoyant, said she sensed a dark presence in the home, fixated on Carolyn. During one séance, Carolyn reportedly became possessed, speaking in a voice that wasn't her own before being thrown across the room. The Perrons begged the Warrens to stop the ritual. Skeptics argue that the events were exaggerated, that the family's fear and the house's age created the perfect storm for imagination. But even after the Perrons moved out in 1980, later owners reported unexplained phenomena. Doors locking from the inside when no one was there, objects disappearing and reappearing in impossible places. The sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor upstairs, even when the second floor was empty. One visitor described standing in the living room, feeling a warm breath against her neck. When she turned, there was no one there, but her hair was still moving. In 2013, the story of the Perron family was adapted into the horror film The Conjuring. The attention brought curious visitors, and with them, more reports. Phones drained instantly to 0%. Cameras refused to focus in certain rooms, and some guests claimed that after leaving the house, they continued to hear knocks and whispers in their own homes. The Whaley House, San Diego, California. Some houses get older, this one gets heavier. On the corner of San Diego Avenue and Harney Street, in the heart of Old Town, sits a brick Greek revival home that looks more East Coast than California. White trim, red brick, a tidy balcony that faces the sun. Tourists take photos, buy taffy, and wander through the plaza without ever noticing what the house notices back. Locals don't call it beautiful, they call it busy. The Whaley House was built in 1857 by Thomas Whaley, a New York-born merchant who wanted to bring permanence to a frontier town. He picked the spot for its central location. He ignored the warning that came with it. 5 years earlier, in 1852, a tall, rough drifter named Yankee Jim Robinson was executed right here, on a crude gallows thrown together over a wooden wagon. The trap wasn't long enough. When the rope went tight, his boots scraped the bedboards. Witnesses said he swung, choking, feet dragging wood, for nearly a minute before the world let him go. Whaley knew. He built anyway. The house wasn't just a home, it became San Diego's first commercial theater. a general store, and for a time, even a county courthouse. Babies were born here. A child died here. A daughter's life ended here. Joy and grief braided into the rafters. Thomas and Anna Whaley's infant son, Thomas Jr., died of scarlet fever. After that, visitors began hearing small sounds in still rooms, soft crying fading down the stairwell, the jingle of a toy that no one had touched. Their daughter Violet, married young, was abandoned and fell into despair. In 1885, she walked to the second floor, wrapped a length of cloth through a curtain fixture, and shot herself in the chest. She was 22. Her blood was cleaned. The curtains were replaced. The house didn't forget. Ask a docent, and they'll tell you the official activity. Footsteps, heavy, measured, crossing the upstairs hall when no one is there. The parlor rocking chair moving gently, as if someone has just risen. The smell of cigar smoke in the study, Thomas's habit, and violet perfume at the top of the stairs, Anna's touch. Doors that lock from the inside, only to open cleanly when a frightened guide tries the knob again. Cold spots that don't drift like drafts. They hold their ground. A lace curtain that breathes inward when the windows are shut tight. But the stories that stick are the ones with names. Yankee Jim is the most famous. Visitors describe the sensation of a tall man stepping in behind them as they stand at the foot of the stairs, the exact line his boots scraped during the hanging. Tour groups freeze at the same moment, like a single body feeling a single weight. Some say they've heard the low creak of a rope in a house with no ropes left. In the courtroom, yes, the courtroom inside the house, people hear leather soles and the clack of a gavel that isn't on the table anymore. On the theatre nights, when the small stage is lit for historical demonstrations, staff have watched a shadow take a seat 2 rows in and never stand again, even after the lights come up. There's a photograph the guides don't always show. A long exposure of the upstairs landing taken during a private tour. Banister, oil portrait, the glossy dark of polished wood, and the faint outline of a woman's skirt. Mid-sway, half a person where no person was. Skeptics call it lens flare. The photographer, who has spent a decade shooting interiors, kept that frame and deleted the rest. Audio, too. Phones die in certain rooms. When they work, they pick up whispers that shouldn't be there. A girl counting softly in the nursery. A woman saying don't, close enough to the mic to move the waveform. One guest, alone at the end of a late tour, reached for the banister and snatched her hand back as if she'd been scolded. Hot, she said, shaking her fingers. The wood was cool to everyone else who touched it a second later. The house has a sense of time stacked on top of one another, like thin glass. Turn your head in the kitchen and swear you just missed someone coming through the pantry. Stand in the front parlor and feel the itch between your shoulder blades that says you're being watched from the stairs. Lean toward the glass cases in the old storeroom and something leans back, your reflection, or a face that doesn't quite line up with yours. On quiet afternoons, the docents hear a piano key sound upstairs. There is no functioning piano. On crowded nights, the house goes still as if listening to itself. Skeptics point to power of suggestion. This is Old Town, creaky floors, thin plaster, and stories piled up like postcards. People bring fear with them, and fear returns the favor. But even the practical staff admit there are rules they follow without putting them on the brochure. They don't turn their back to the staircase when they lock up. They don't stand on the exact spot where the gallows wagon used to sit. Out of respect, just in case respect is a language the house still understands, and they do not say Violet's name out loud at the landing after dark. The Whaley House isn't abandoned. It's curated, restored, and meticulously cared for by people who love history. Maybe that's why the history here feels alive. Not because the past refuses to leave, but because the present keeps inviting it to stay. Walk out onto the porch, and the world jumps back to color. Tourists, mariachi, streetlights warming to evening. You'll say it was nothing. Sound plays tricks, old wood remembers to creak. Then a block away you'll smell a cigar that no one is smoking. And you'll realize the heaviness didn't lift when you crossed the threshold. It learned your pace. Some houses let you leave with a story. Others make sure you take something heavier. And in a quiet New England town, one home never ran out of questions. The rooms are small, the crime was loud, and the echoes are still counting. The Lizzie Borden house, Fall River, Massachusetts. Some crime scenes fade. This one just learned to breathe between the boards. At 232nd Street in Fall River, Massachusetts, stands a house painted pale with black shutters, ordinary enough to disappear into the neighborhood. If you didn't know, you'd walk past it. But the moment you step onto the front porch, you feel it. A thickness in the air, as if the walls are holding their breath until you cross inside. The year was 1892. Andrew Borden was a wealthy but notoriously frugal man. His wife Abby ran the household with a firm hand. His daughter Lizzie lived there still unmarried, along with her sister Emma. On the morning of August 4th, Abby Borden went upstairs to make the bed in the guest room. She never came down. At some point between the folding of the sheets and the ticking of the clock, she was struck 19 times in the head with a hatchet. Her blood seeped into the carpet and soaked the side of the bed frame. Minutes or hours later, Andrew returned home from errands. He lay down for a nap on the sitting room couch. He too never got up. 10 blows, clean and brutal, split his skull and spattered the wall. The trial that followed made national headlines. Lizzie was accused, arrested and acquitted, leaving the murders legally unsolved. No one else was ever charged. Theories have multiplied ever since. Was Lizzie guilty? Was it a stranger? A family secret gone violent? The house never answered. What it does do, even now, is remember. Visitors who stay overnight, yes, the house is now a bed and breakfast, report an immediate sense of unease in the guest bedroom where Abby was killed. Some say they feel a sudden drop in temperature, as if someone has just entered the room behind them. Others claim to smell something metallic, sharp like fresh blood, though the wood has been scrubbed for more than a century. In the sitting room, people swear they hear the faint sound of a man groaning, as if roused from sleep and realizing too late he should have stayed asleep. The couch where Andrew died is long gone, but guests who sit in its place have described feeling dizzy, short of breath, or as though something unseen is leaning close enough to whisper. The most unsettling accounts happen at night. Lights turn on by themselves. Floorboards creak in patterns that sound like pacing, back and forth, outside the bedroom doors. Some guests have heard the sound of a hatchet head tapping against the floorboard, slow and deliberate, as if someone were testing its weight. Staff say the most active spot is the staircase. It's narrow, and as you climb it, the guest room doorway comes into view. More than one visitor has frozen halfway up, certain they saw a woman standing in the doorway, only for her to vanish when they blinked. Skeptics point to the house's fame. Everyone knows the rhyme. Lizzie Borden took an axe, and maybe guests bring their fear with them. But even those who arrive laughing have left pale, refusing to talk about the dreams they had in the upstairs bedrooms. One investigator brought high-end audio recorders, expecting nothing but creaks and hums. Instead, on playback, he caught a faint female voice saying one word: closer. Today, the Lizzie Borden house is both museum and overnight stay. Its rooms staged to look exactly as they did in 1892. You can sit where Andrew sat, walk where Abby fell, and try to sleep in the rooms where someone once swung a blade until there was nothing left to swing at. If you do, remember this. The house is polite. It will let you leave, but it won't let you forget. 6 houses, 6 addresses where the walls remember. Far more than they should. Some will greet you with a jolt the moment you step inside. Others will wait until you feel safe, just once, leaning against the wall in your own bedroom. So the next time you walk past an old house with the curtains drawn, ask yourself if you really want to know what's inside. Because once you find out, you can't unknow it. Drop a comment below. Which one of these houses would you dare to spend a night in, and which one would you stay away from, no matter what?